Hello, good evening, and welcome to Do You Expect Us to Talk? Or, it could be good morning, depending on what time you're listening to it, but hey-yo. It is I...
Do you think there's people listening to this in the morning somewhere really offended because you said good evening and they're like, what about us, you thoughtless bastard?
It's lunchtime, what are you on about?
I don't think like really offended.
Where it's ahead of us.
Maybe rolling their eyes of like, maybe it's some mild tutting, maybe.
Yeah. Mild tutting? That's like a revolution in the UK, mild tutting. They'll be on the streets showing disapproval.
You know somebody's really irate when they tut at you.
Hands on waist and doing like breathing out behind people. You know, we go, oh.
Yeah. Shit, yeah, bit of head shaking. Showing signs of disapproval. Yeah,
face palm.
It's getting out of hand. So yeah, episode 240, Chris, carry on.
Yeah, it's episode... Oh, thank you for queuing me in. Yes, so it's Do You Expect to Talk Book Club this time. We are returning to Fleming, not necessarily the films themselves, but the novels, which up to this point...
Fleming, the village in Devon.
Yes.
Let's go there.
Yes, I didn't know that existed, to be fair, so they...
Yeah, but it's probably not in Devon now. I've probably fucked that up. Hang on, don't worry about it. I'll look it up. I should have had it ready, but it's Fleming, obviously.
And we will inform the listeners on the day's findings.
Oh, it's in Cornwall. Sorry, it's just near. It's near Saltash. It's right by. Oh, sorry, listeners.
Well, we don't. We want to be truthful, don't we? On these.
Sorry
We've got to get our facts straight. You've got to make sure they're fun. I've got to make sure they're correct.
All right. I'm embarrassed enough. Don't rub it in.
So,
sorry, Dave.
So anyway, as you know, my name's Chris, and with us is Dave and Becca.
Hello.
Good evening, folks.
As always. So today we are discussing the first James Bond novel, Casino Royale. And as a newbie, even though I'm a lifelong fan of the films, I've never read the novels, so this is a first one for me. But obviously, you guys have actually much more acquainted with the novels than I have.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, if I quickly go first, if I had to estimate, I've read this 4 or 5 times. So I would say, much like with the films, big Bond novel fans will have read this probably more times than that. I've read it more than any other book in the series simply because it goes first. So when you do this, I think I'll reread Bond, and then you read Casino Royale and forget to go any further or stall on one of the next ones. So I would estimate, I read it in about 97, something like that. So I was in my 20s by the time I read it. I think I was 20. And I read them all about, I lose track of time. It's since we've been running. I read them all a few years ago anyway. And I made sure I got all the ones I hadn't previously read. I had some of them on Kindle. I had some of them on audiobook. I think I've got nearly all of them on audiobook now. And did a mixture with them, listened to a few, read a few. With some of them I read bits and then sort of went to where in the book I got to reading and listened to a bit. And I read it again this time. So yeah, like I say, probably about 4 or 5 times, possibly more, I've read it. Wouldn't say I was an expert on it by any stretch of the imagination. The majority of Fleming, as we'll discuss, I've read once each. I think all of the sort of first half I've read more than that. Certainly up to something like From Russia with Love, Dr. No, I've read them all at least twice. Moonraker I've probably read 3 times or so. But yeah, this is the book I probably know best. It's not my favourite. It's among my favourites. It's in the sort of top 4 or 5 probably. We'll sort of reveal my favourite when I get there. I probably already have on podcasts in the past. Doesn't quite match my favourite film, but both of my favourite books are among my top few films. And Casino Royale's a good book. It's a very what I think it does better than any of the other books is its finish. I think it really gains momentum towards the end and really wants you leaving more. But that's me with it. What about you, Becca?
Yeah. So yeah, our history with the books and the films is a little bit different. I think we probably discussed it way back when we started reviewing Bond on this podcast, so I might not go through it again. I sort of picked this book when I was sort of like getting into Bond, that sort of thing. it's one of those things where, you know, all the references, especially like the 50s or 60s references, kind of go over your head a little bit when you're reading this when you're a little bit younger. It's probably not something that you learn about until you grow up and become a bit more worldly wise, I guess. Yeah, it's probably one of my favourite books of all time. I'm just saying that because it's a Bond Bond book. But like for me, like I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. Like one of the opening to this book, like the scent and smoke and sweats of a casino are nauseating at 2 in the morning. Like I think it's up there with one of those. You know, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. You know, a woman in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a man in possession of a fortune must be in want of a wife. You know, it's one of the greatest literary openings, I feel. Yeah, sort of came to it, you know, sort of I was getting into Bond, that sort of thing. You know, obviously discovered the rest of the Fleming era. I think for me, it's probably up there with my favourites, along with like Moonraker, Majesties. You know, so it's up there with the, you know, the big hitters really. Not just in terms of Bond, but probably like in my sort of top novels of all time, definitely. The film and the book kind of depart at various stages. It's quite an interesting adaptation. And it's, you know, it's great to kind of see that it's been reissued in the anniversary year, which is really, really cool. But yeah, and I really enjoy this novel quite a lot. I find myself going back to them in both Bond books and the films many times throughout the year. So it's one that I come back to. So yeah, looking forward to get stuck into it.
Yeah. So some basic differences and basic similarities. Well, first off, the anniversary Becca refers to is it's 70 years old this year. I think if Ian Fleming, if he'd still been alive, would have turned 115 this year.
Wow.
I think it was his centenary in 2008, wasn't it? Where you got the Sebastian Faulks book.
Yep. Yeah, that was the anniversary novel.
A Devil May Care. Yeah.
Yep, I believe so.
I always go to say Devil May Cry, but that's a video game, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about vampires.
So when I reread the books now, I tend to put the continuation novels that are in chronological order with it. I don't love many of the continuation novels, but I do really like the ones we've had in the last few years, and I've just blanked on his name. Forever in a Day.
Oh, Anthony Horowitz.
Anthony Horowitz. I should know that name. I just blanked for a moment.
Great.
He's done 3 now, and I've got one of them I've sort of not got to, and I think it's because it's right at the end. The one he's just released is right at the end of the timeline. The first one he produced, Trigger Mortis, was a couple of weeks after Goldfinger. He's with Pussy Galore at the start of the film, the start of the book, sorry. And then he did one about his recruitment into the 00 section. And it is a section. It's not a program. Whatever Sam Mendes did, it's not a program. It's a section.
Yeah, he called it a 00 program. It's like
I know it's not a program.
It's a 00 section.
It is, but
yeah, it's not the Bourne films. It's not like Blackbriar or.
I know it's not. Yeah, it's not.
Dreadstone or something like that. It's
not a time-sensitive project or something. It's a department. But anyway. Yeah. So the film does his sort of recruitment and his two kills that give him the 00, which is a 00 as in the letters of the alphabet in the books. It's not 00, but anyway.
No, because he's called 007, isn't he?
It's 007, but I mean, it's just a difference. It doesn't matter. It seems to refer to the same thing, although you could be very pedantic on reading it. It is 2 murders, one from distance, one in close, very like in the film, but they're different. Or one is messy and one is clean. But in the book, one is literally at distance, and we'll get to it. But it is saying about it's killing in cold blood. So the book could be read. So I'm going to do that by mistake a few times. The book could be read to mean it's the second kill that gives him the 00, not that it's 10 for each murder, but that's splitting hairs. That book tells you about how he gets recruited in. The book starts with like 007 is dead, but it's his predecessor, and it's about them sort of settling on this guy that they were sort of grooming to replace or be the next one in, and just him being called in his first case in the south of France, actually. In that case, there are a couple of continuity errors, like the cigarettes he smokes in Casino Royale, he's been smoking for about 20 years, but you get the origin of those in a book that's only set a few months before. So there are some errors, but it does flow really nicely into this. So I do put the sort of, so in my head, it's sort of not the first Bond book now, because I put the other one in because it fits so well. But it is obviously the first novel. As we talked about when we did the film, the reason it wasn't there was rights issues around adapting it, but also it was the fact that Dr. No was seen as a sort of good, self-contained, relatively you can control costs on it. They thought it was a bit more cinematic than a card game, and lots of reasons they went with Dr. No. This was adapted for television a year later with Card Sense Jimmy Bond,
starring Peter Lorre
and Valerie Mathis. Peter Lorre is actually probably a lot closer than Mads Mikkelsen to the book description.
He's really good. He's maybe a bit stereotyped, but he's really good.
And the book starts. We'll go through the book in a minute, but that first line that she likened it to Pride and Prejudice, which I can't hear without thinking of Black Books now.
No,
where Daddy goes, "He want of a wife." They had to teach him to read in 3 days, a bloodthirsty gangster. But anyway, that's another story. But yeah, if you can get past the fact it was co-written with Graham Linehan, that episode's very, very funny. So the book starts in Casino Royale. It starts at the casino with them preparing for the game and Bond sort of getting his eye in. And then we go back a couple of weeks to like his recruitment into this job. So it is much more focused with a little bit of backstory on him getting to the casino, meeting Mathis as he is in the book.
Not Mathis.
Not Mathis. Well,
Mathis is really your friend, Mathis.
It made me smile actually because in Quantum of Solace, because he's called Mathis, right? Which, if you thought about it for a second, you'd realise it should be Mati, and it's French.
Yeah.
But of course, it's played by an Italian, so you don't even think about it. But in Quantum of Solace, he said, "Is that a cover name?" And he said, "It's not a very good one, is it?" And I think
we don't know anything more about it, but Mathis does pop up, and I think he pops up in some of the, I want to say, the Raymond Benson continuation novels as well.
I don't remember.
So he proves to be quite a, even though he's kind of written off, I feel, a little bit in Quantum. I kind of feel like he's quite a staunch ally.
What is he in this book? He's kind of like local. Is he police?
He's kind of like local. Yeah, he's I don't do French. Yeah, so it's basically kind of like maybe like a branch of like French special services or something, for example. My French is terrible. I do apologise.
Okay, well that's.
But he's basically kind of like Bond's contact, and so obviously you've got Felix from the CIA, and you've got Mathis from.
It's external military intelligence agency,
yeah.
So it is effectively like MI6, okay, yeah. But it's their own one, whereas Bond is actually going off intelligence from the head of Station S.
Yep.
Okay, so just very, very quickly then, the few differences before we go into the book. Bond is a first time. It is very like the Craig version in that he is a new recruit to this particular section, but he's a veteran agent. He's in his mid-30s, similar to Craig. Craig was 37 casting and filming, 38 on release. He's physically described very different, much slimmer, cold, brutal eyes, a bit of a sort of scar on one eye. He does have the comma of hair that you only ever really see in GoldenEye. This is Royale.
Yeah, a little bit with Connery as well, but never mind. Yeah. Anyway, that's literally splitting hairs. Carry on.
Connery is extremely close, to be honest. People always talk about Dalton, but like obviously Connery got to play some of the more faithful adaptations, and he does play it with this sort of slight cold detachment that women are a bit disposable to him. There are some strong similarities, but of course it's not an exact match. I mean, I always often think of somebody like Jason Isaacs, but anyway, just very quick, some quick differences on character.
I always thought Michael Fassbender for reading and listening to this.
He would have been superb around the time of sort of First Class or something.
X-Men, yeah.
Because he's about my age and he'd have been right then. But there you go. And obviously we do get his audition scene effectively in the Argentina sequence in X-Men First Class. But anyway, so the story is nearly all set in this area, Royale les Eaux, which is a spa town, and it's just up the road from like Dieppe. And I think, and it's very it's in Normandy basically, so it is referred to as not that far from London. It's just across the water. Bond is there effectively. His cover is through Jamaica because he knows Jamaica, which again makes it feel like a sequel to Doctor No, but it isn't. We haven't had Doctor No yet, but it sets up that the guy knows Jamaica, and all the contact is through like an agent that is undercover on the pictures desk of the like local newspaper there.
Was that all a bit like Fleming talking about himself though, a little bit?
Yeah, this is all Fleming. This book, we'll go on to Fleming in a minute, and maybe Becca might be able to tell us a little bit more about him because she knows a bit more biographically. But I've always felt Bond is what Fleming would have liked to have been. And he wrote this when he was about to sort of enter into a marriage with a previously married woman who was a mistress of his, who wasn't a particularly warm character, didn't like his writing, and I get the impression he didn't particularly want to marry her. So the idea he went and wrote this sort of womanizing agent, you know, you can understand it. But he did have
a bit of wish fulfillment, really, wasn't it? It's kind of like the life. Obviously, it was partly informed by his own life in like naval intelligence and things like that. So, but yeah, partly kind of like how he wished he could be, and obviously it contains a lot of attitudes and sentiments that are prevalent and obviously don't make them right, but they're prevalent and you know popular at the time, unfortunately. But no, yeah, I would largely agree. Dave, it was pretty much. I mean, there are wonderful Fleming biographies out there you can read, and there's a new one out just this year by Nicholas.
I need to read one. I never have. I don't know that much about him except what you get in like Bond extras and what you pick up in pop culture. I do think when things like To Kill a Mockingbird were being written in this era, I still think his attitudes were something of an outlier. I still think he was like very much upper class British. I don't think, of
course, yeah, definitely.
You know, I
just sort of things that they were sort of generally sort of prevalent at the time. But yeah, he's very much of the upper echelons for sure.
But let's just quickly run through the differences and similarities. So again, Bond's first mission. Again, Le Chiffre. Le Chiffre is an asthmatic, as in the film, but he's very fat and walks with a cane. He's much more, although Le Chiffre in the film has a girlfriend. This Le Chiffre is very much a womanizer and a bit disgusting with it. You get that with a lot of the description of Bond villains. They're a little bit, they make your skin crawl a bit. And instead of losing his job, his money, he's lost Soviet money because he's basically, it's a union, isn't it? He's like paymaster of a union in Eastern France.
Yeah, it's the French Communist Trade Party.
Yeah. So
union.
it's basically Soviet money, and he's lost it. And what they can't decide from the backstory, which we'll go on to the book structure in a minute, because I think it's masterful. But we find out his backstory, and he's lost it investing in basically brothels in northern France.
Investing the wrong way.
They've said that the problem is they can't tell whether he's invested in it as a way to make money, genuinely speculate to accumulate, or is it just because he's so sex obsessed? And just after that, a law comes in France that basically cracks down immensely on both brothels and pornography. So suddenly he's invested a load of Soviet money, SMERSH money, if you like. And SMERSH is kind of, it's a little bit like the KGB, but it's to do with weeding out dissidents in your own country.
Death to spies, espionage.
So double agents and that sort of thing. And he's basically lost the money. So he's now desperate to save his life by winning it back. But it's not lost in the same manner. Bond has gone there because they see an opportunity to bankrupt him. So again, best gambler in the service is him. So they've sent him there to do very much the same. There's no third act in Venice. His time with Vesper after the game, because we'll assume that everybody here knows that Bond wins after previously losing, and he goes off with Vesper, and her past catches up with her. He catches up with it. He stays in the town or like a little village outside, and it's like a farmhouse or something. So it's none of this world travel. He stays in the immediate area with her for a while, and those are largely the differences. So the film starts in the casino, and then we go back to how Bond is tasked with it, and also the next chapter is M reading the dossier on both Le Chiffre and on SMERSH. So the film sets us up for what we're going to see, and then gives us backstory on the main antagonist of many of the Bond films, SMERSH, which is effectively what Spectre becomes in the films. We get Spectre in the books, but only in a trilogy that we'll talk about in a bit.
It's like you hear from him from Shield Further, didn't he? When he's kind of Grant's explaining his plan, and he's like SMERSH, and he's like SMERSH, Spectre, and you know. Yeah. And then obviously later on in Living Daylights we get SMERSH Bjornum.
Yeah, which is why the Living Daylights is such a Fleming callback, really.
Yes.
Quite aside from using, so that's my sort of setup, really. What do we want to talk about first, then? I suppose we can just talk a little bit. I've just talked about Le Chiffre. Becca, how is Felix Leiter different than the Daniel Craig iteration that you can remember?
Well, he's English, isn't he?
No, he's Texan, isn't he?
Texan. I was going to say in the 1950s TV version, you've got like American card sense Jimmy Bond, and you've got British. Yeah, you've got British.
Clarence Leiter.
I was like, what's going on there? Yeah. He's Texan, kind of like broad, kind of broad accent, that sort of thing. I do. It sounds really weird, even though I think this is like personally one of my sort of favourite novels. It doesn't mean I condone any of kind of like the slights, or like I don't. Obviously, some of the descriptions that Fleming uses, I tried to divert. I think it'd be really terrible, and obviously quite now with the modern lens, quite racist, and that sort of thing.
That's mainly the second book. It's mainly this book. It's mainly sexist, isn't it? I'd say.
Yeah, there's a lot of sexism, racism, that sort of thing. Especially when we get to Live and Let Die, you just have to skip passages, and it's
I'll read it with a good heart, but I've often skipped it, but I won't. I promise I won't sit complaining about the racist language.
No, but it's the way which I
will talk about it at the start, and then we'll forget about it. But
I was just trying to say that Felix, I think, is perhaps a little bit of a stereotype here, a little bit obviously set up as as an ally of Bond. But for here, definitely, I do think he's a little bit of kind of like a Texan stereotype.
He's a deep South blonde Texan, yeah. Yeah,
pretty much, and it's kind of we've sort of seen this a familiar trope, certainly like in spy fiction as well. But no, I think it's good that you see Felix kind of very early on, and it's you go back to the 2006 film, obviously Jeffrey Wright, excellent portrayal. Definitely is obviously completely different to the novel. But
it doesn't matter because his Texan background's not that relevant. You just need an American. You need an American agent.
That's it, and it adds a bit of obviously it's a kind of time where, especially with the films kind of got really popular, where like foreign travel wasn't really, especially sort of package holidays, things like that, wasn't kind of, it was really yet sort of to take off, as it were. If you had a lot of money, you could do it, but it wasn't perhaps to the advent of the package. Excuse me. Advent of the package holiday, for example, and things like that, to kind of really, and advent in technology as well, to kind of really make travel more accessible for the average working person. So like adding these kind of different, having these exotic locales, international population, like I say, international cast, kind of adds a bit sort of to adds a bit of kind of like sort of flavour and sound and colour and that sort of thing. It's not just exclusively populated by British white males, so.
Absolutely. So that's the setup. What we know about SMERSH, just think what you know about Spectre from the films. It's more or less the same idea, and it is about these sort of spheres of influence, and of course they really don't want communism spreading through France. We were always, the West was always very comfortable about them annexing parts of Eastern Europe, but not, just as they weren't particularly worried about America and South America, for example. And so it goes on. But the background to Bond is he lives in, what do we learn about him? He's got a housekeeper called May, is she? She's Scottish.
Yeah, Scottish May.
He's obsessed with eggs. Doesn't like tea, drinks coffee, drives a 1930s Bentley.
Bentley
Supercharger, which if you look it up as a really old-fashioned,
yeah, well, not now it is, but I think probably back then, I don't know if
it was still an old car, but it's his pride and joy. He goes through a few cars through the course of the films, including, I think, in Goldfinger he does drive an Aston Martin, but he drives like a DB3 because of when the book was written or something like that, but we'll come to that. And so, they go to Royale. It's Normandy. It's very near the Somme, where some action in the World War, the First World War took place, certainly. And yeah, Rene Mathis is there kind of as an observer, really. And Vesper is there. She's not a treasurer. She works for Station S, and that is the bit.
Yeah, she has a slightly different role here than she does in the film, didn't she? So
Station S deals with the Soviet Union. It's basically the bit of it's intelligence on the Soviet Union, and she goes there, and she is British, and she's physically described very like Eva Green, but she is undoubtedly a fairly prim and proper British. And every description of her mentions her chest, which is very Fleming, isn't it? Her protuberances.
With a fantastic breast.
yes.
Or something like that.
My favourite female description was when he says about Moneypenny, and he says how beautiful she'd be if it wasn't for her eyes being quizzical. And I'm just thinking, has any man in this world ever been getting intimate with a woman?
Put off by a woman's quizzical
eyes? And then they've
eyes.
just gone, hang on, those eyes are a bit quizzical.
I don't think I've ever been put off by a man's quizzical eyes. That sounds a bit rude, but it's
I don't really know
what a strange, what a strange quality.
Does it look like she's trying to work out a crossword all the time?
Yeah, how quizzical do you mean, Ian? Come on, tell us all about it, Fleming Bond. Come on.
So
eyes, what the hell?
That's it. He goes down. He's given.
Well, now we know why Bond never shags.
That's why.
Eyes too quizzical. I don't know why he couldn't have done it.
Sorry, Penny, your eyes too quizzical. I just can't do it.
Could have burnt Lois Maxwell over the desk or something, surely. But anyway.
Well, they do in Die Another Day, don't they? They finally get around to it.
Another point about money for anyone reading this. Those of us old enough to remember the French franc, it was about 9 or 10 to the pound, roughly. But this is the old franc that came in the early 1960s. Francs in this book are about 1,000 to the pound. So when they're talking in millions, it's thousands, really. So he's told he's going to be playing with 25 million francs, which is actually £25,000. And he's given 10. He'll get 10 later on, and he's told to make the other 5 himself because they're told to get their eye in. So, yeah, he's sent over there to play for a while first. It's a working casino. It's not just shut down for this, although there is obviously a game with this going on. And he's just playing various games. And they're playing baccarat. Chris, did you understand baccarat?
Kind of. It was kind of like they had to get to 9, and one of the best 9 wins.
Yeah.
I mean, and it still might well be playing Snap, as far as I know, but
yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how I understand. It was a lot more like simplistic. I thought I'm very fast. It's not like, the
games are quite quick, aren't they?
Yeah, when you think about it, you think, is it like poker or things like that? Like it is in a film, or
it still goes over an extended period. I didn't. They would have a couple of games and then they'd be away from the table for a bit, and that was very like the film. I couldn't tell how many days it went over. When he'd won the game and he's having a meal with Vesper, that he says something about he remembered the previous night when he was preparing to play, but I don't remember there being a second day. But it's over a period of time in the same way, but it's a smaller group around that kidney table shape.
It does feel very much like Bond plays Le Chiffre, Bond loses, Bond re-enters and then wins.
But he goes all in as soon as he's back in.
Yeah, it's pretty much all almost within like pages. It's like it's all done relatively quickly.
I did feel a little bit with that because all right. So for those that have seen the film, very quickly on baccarat, you get dealt 2 cards face down in this version anyway, because there's various different versions like Chemin de Fer, but that's about who the banker is and who's betting against who. But you get 2 cards and you can have a third face up. And you've got to get as close to 9 as possible without busting it. 8 or 9 tends to be the goal. 7 you'll stick on. 6 you'll probably stick on. 5 is kind of the crux, where the odds are even as to whether you get better or worse from drawing another card. So obviously if you were given 4 and 5, that's 9, you stick. If you're given 9 and say a king, that's 9 as well, because the picture cards don't count at all. And only the number, if you get a 2-digit number, i.e. you get a 9 and a 3, let's say, you've actually got 2, because they only count the right-hand number where it's a 2-digit number. So if you've got 12, you disregard the 1, if that makes sense. Okay? So if you had 9 and 3, you'd ask for a third card, because you've got 12, not 9, or you've got 2, not 12 or 9. And an ace counts for 1. And that's how it works. And all the gambling is based on, they can see your third card if you drew one, and they've got to gamble on what did you have to make you draw that third card. So, for example, if your third card is a 6, they have to think, well, did he have 3 or less, or did he have 5, and think, I'll gamble. And that's kind of how it works. If I have one complaint with it, I think it does play a little bit like a game of pure luck. I think Texas Hold'em is, my only problem is with the name. I think Texas is the least fucking sophisticated European sounding game in the world. But poker is actually a bit more cinematic, and people have a gist of how poker works, even if they don't fully understand. Baccarat, you'd have to explain. The other flaw is, yes, he gets bankrupted in the exact same way, gets a check from Leiter for the full, from about as much as he'd lost, if not more. Whereas in this game, in the film, he's staked with what he has left, and he said, "Look, I'm bleeding chips." So Bond has to work his way back up again. In this one, he's given a check marked with the envelope marked martial aid, which, if you know any World War II history, is actually a really smart line. Because if the Americans didn't win the war, they certainly won the peace. So he then goes all in. He just gambles it all in, which is kind of abrupt. So I think the book is abrupt. I think it could actually be a bit longer. But then it leads us into a third act, which is kind of heartbreaking and then really cool at the same time. So that's really the gist of Baccarat and what they're playing. Some bits on Bond. Bond is put there through Jamaica. He resents that a woman's there, because they should just be in the kitchen with their pots and pans, and they're distracting. I actually think that's a little bit of a cover, don't you, Becca? I think that's Bond trying to convince himself, because he's actually attracted to her. He's worried it's going to distract him.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me, I just had a quick drink there. Yeah, so basically, obviously, Bond's eye is squarely on the mission. Obviously, he's a bit, as you know, Fleming is a little bit himself. Like, Bond is also a womanizer. He's known, and this is kind of where, you know, Fleming does lay down the DNA of that for sure. When he's kind of on a mission, you know, he's kind of got to keep his eye on the prize, as it were. And as you say, like, women are very much kind of like disposable pleasures, really. But he's kind of, it's a bit weird. It's almost a bit of a strange split. Like, on one breath, he's kind of saying, yeah, women should, you know, they belong in the kitchen with the pots and pans, things like that. But then also, you know, he's describing how, like, sumptuously beautiful that Vesper is, and, you know, he'll go on about women's heaving breasts and other aspects of you know, that attracts him. It's just like, well, you can't have it both ways, you know.
Yeah.
It just seems like a really sort of really weird split. But yeah, he seems very much, you know, unless he kind of wants to take them on, like, as a conquest, for example. Unfortunately, they are very much the distraction there. And I like how you're talking about women, so you bring on me. Oh, right, so I'm the token. Unfortunately. But yeah, that's just kind of weird. And that's not just on Casino Royale as well. That's pretty much like a trademark throughout. I mean, like, Goldfinger's quite famous for it as well. I mean, obviously. Pursuit Law, for example, is a lot more obvious in the book than it is in the film. Obviously, there are lines like, you know, turn off the charm, I'm immune. And obviously, they're fighting the Bond where Bond obviously turns her, unfortunately. But like in the book, it's laid on a lot more thickly, which is very shocking for the time.
From Russia with Love as well.
Well, it's like, this is it. Yeah.
Rosa Klebb tries to, like, sleep with Tatiana.
That's it, yeah, and the description of the, you know, the gypsy fights and things like that, for example. Sorry, Romani, so I do apologise, I don't mean to use that offensive word. The traveller camp. As well, just some of the descriptions, they're very vivid. But it's just almost kind of very strange, kind of dichotomy almost. of like, you know, someone's very beautiful, but then also very much confined to that sort of traditional domestic role, and you know, woe betide you, you know, if you try to break out of that. So
yeah. I guess a couple of other differences to discuss would be that the threats on Bond's life, he's nearly killed before the game starts. I think he blows his cover much as in the film. He's arrogant enough to sort of do that. But isn't he killed the night before with an explosion?
Yeah, tried to blow him up the night before, didn't they?
So this kind of happens just as he meets Vesper for the first time. Literally, just like.
She's brought for a drink with them all, or
yeah,
something.
With
Mathis.
Yeah, Mathis. I think he said
Mathis.
Yeah.
If you say Mathis, so what?
Mathis is the painter. I just call him Mathis.
Mind you, it's only because I went with the audiobook anyway. If I'd physically read it and never done an audiobook, I would have read it as Mathis anyway.
Yeah.
No, it's Mathis, definitely.
Yeah.
I do think Mathis is actually one of the more faithful adaptations in the film. I think he kind of he's kind of exactly who I pick. I mean, I know I've got like the disadvantage of seeing the film first, but he kind of translates well into the book, I think.
He's a troubleshooter, and he also says something very similar about melted your cold dead heart.
Yeah,
that's a line from the novel.
He has that kind of like very sort of warm charm of this kind of like, and also of being like a bit more like clued on and like knowing what's going on, but also being like dead like this is introducing Vesper. Oh, this is the Mrs. Lynd. You know, like
congratulations on your protuberances. We were one.
Yeah.
He was talking about her nipples and everything, describing her. Yeah.
I will say this though. There is something about the way that Fleming writes, and I don't know whether it's because I'm not, for anyone listening, I am not like a huge reader, so maybe it's just down to my sheer inexperience of like what reading actual novels is actually like. But I listened to the audiobook of like Garth Marenghi. I don't know if anyone knows what Garth Marenghi, but Garth Marenghi's like a parody of like a Stephen King.
Go and do yourself a favour, listeners. Go and find, by whatever means necessary, the 2004 sitcom Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
It's brilliant. It really is brilliant.
Go on,
yeah,
Chris.
He's got a new book
tell
out.
listeners a bit about him, though. Yeah, go on.
Oh well, basically he's like a parody of Stephen King in this kind of like really sort of high-inflated opinion of himself, but really he just turns out shit. he just cut
overlong shit, normally set in Romford or something.
Yeah.
A nondescript town in Essex.
But and I listened to he's come out with 2 books actually. But I listened to the first one, Terradrome, or I think it's something like that.
Terradome, I think.
Terradome.
Yeah.
And
I haven't listened to it, but I might do now. Is it good?
It is. I don't know. I kind of like think I kind of get tripped up with like the way of his writing style and the way he was like, when like most of the comedy is down to him explaining unnecessary details or getting lost. do you mean things like that? And that's the kind of the thing where
Terratome, incarcerate in Terratome.
And that was this is kind of the thing with like Fleming. Sometimes I thought like, do you really need to be like describing these as much as you are, like, or you kind of getting lost in sort of like details that aren't that important, like, and then Bond sort of thinks, oh yes, I think I'll tip the waiter, and then yes, I'll give the full list of the of the menu order, and like, she's got cracking breath, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think.
Wasn't he called Nick in Dark Place as well? Or is his lead men always called? Hang on a minute.
I don't know. In Terror, he's basically sort of like writing about like a version of himself.
Yeah.
It's and it's kind of like
he's Rick Douglas, and yeah,
it's kind of like a trilogy of stories, like of shorter stories, but kind of connect with one another.
I think he's very good. I think he's decent at describing action, and he's very good at describing food and clothing, but it's not belaboured too much. His gaze goes on what Bond's gaze would go on, so that's why he's unashamedly describing Vesper the way he does.
Yeah, but there's just certain little things where I just like thought, I don't know, maybe just kind of a bit prolong that. But then again, I listen to the audiobook quite a lot, so again, maybe.
Yeah, we get it. She's got nice tits.
Yeah, I think it mostly shows in like spoiler is the way that the Chiffre is killed. It goes on about that third eye for like a paragraph.
It does,
and I just thought like, surely the more nuanced take would say, and then the Chiffre had a third eye. We all know what that means, and just leave it as that. And maybe say that he slumps and falls to the ground.
He really rinses that like really gory detail, doesn't he? Just like maybe his publisher were like, Ian, we need more gory detail.
It's not in gory. It's just like it's an eye that without eyelashes, and that just sort of sits in between like the.
We get it. I think it's quite gory, but anyway, that's just me. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's a bit overcooked, isn't it, in some places? But he does kind of give the sort of luxuriate over like the minutiae, the minor details, like as you say, Chris, like the menu order, like the food he eats, the wine he drinks, the car he drives, the clothes he's wearing, everything. You know, you learn about like I think in Dr. No, you know, it goes into great detail about the textures of the material that Bond's wearing, sort of like cotton, linen, things like that.
Yeah,
and it's just.
I don't think I'm particularly good with my examples, quite frankly, because I do appreciate the details, and I think the thing about the you know, as soon as I said it, the tipping of the waiter, I knew exactly why, because that was just after like he got killed by an explosion, so he has this like newfound, I'm gonna enjoy life. Do you know what I mean? So I can understand why that.
Yeah.
Stuff, those certain things are in there. I'm just not really sort of it's. I think anyone who maybe listens to the audio or reads the book might know it's more the smaller things, or maybe just overdoes things just a bit too much.
Yeah.
That makes me think. All right, okay, come on. Move it along.
But then I remember reading a Dean Koontz book years ago, and he was like describing a sunrise, and I was thinking, "Fucking stop!" Do you know what I mean? It's like,
they're quite like tomes, aren't they? They're quite chunkers.
If he didn't spend ages talking about the sunrise, it probably
describing the beautiful sunrise in a really lyrical way.
He's nearly killed but it really laid home how vicious Le Chiffre is, because he's nearly killed right at the start by a couple of Bulgarian henchmen who are themselves killed by these suitcase bombs, when they think one of them is they're different colours, and they think one is just a smoke screen, and they're not. And Bond is literally just saved by being behind something.
Yeah.
It's very close. He comes very close to obviously being a 00. It's a very risky business. But he does come really close to death quite a few times.
And instead of the drugging, he is, although the Vesper's in it, the drink, like literally the same.
Yep.
But
that's where it comes from.
That's where it comes from. They copied that bit. Instead of the drugging, he gets like a gun concealed in a cane held at like the base of his back.
He has to pretend to faint.
Yeah, so he has to.
If you've seen the.
If he doesn't lose immediately, he's going to be paralysed, and the guy would have left before anyone's realised what happened.
Yeah, if you've seen the 1950s TV adaptation, that's quite faithful to this original novel here. Obviously, where the 2006 Daniel Craig film does depart very occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the major differences and similarities. Really, he's in more danger.
Vesper is probably, in terms of characters, probably way different than she is.
She sounds upper middle class British.
Not in the
sounds it.
Not in the description, but mostly in character. And I think probably, especially for modern sensibilities, I think generally speaking, I think the film does a better job of making a character. Do you know if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think she's probably better. Certainly in the Daniel Craig version, she's built up a little bit more, and you find out more about her. You find out more of her backstory.
Eva Green is certainly built.
Yeah. The fact that she's in control.
She's very glamorous. She's very beautiful.
Yeah, she has control of the money. Also adds that element of clash where, no, I'm not going to give you the money. Do you know what I mean? Whether that's not really like a thing in the novel.
It's not. It's not at all. She's just
yeah,
there
she's
as
not.
an
Yeah, in the
assistant.
novel, she's not related at all to the Treasury.
And again, I don't think this helps the fact that I listen to audiobook, but I do find when an audiobook is read by a man and they're reading out a female character's line, it just comes across as a bit.
Yeah, they talk like this.
Yeah.
And Vesper's like, I love you.
I'm pretty sure one of them's read by John and Emily. It might not be, but I'm pretty sure one of them. Oh no, Rosamund Pike.
Yeah.
Rosamund Pike reads the spy.
You should talk like this when she has to do a man's voice. You know.
Yeah,
and
probably.
Bond came in and was like this.
But it's like, okay, this kind of thing. I mean, like even like Stephen Fry, who's does a lot of audiobooks and is quite accomplished. He read like 1984 and like is it Julia the main one? He does the same thing. Yeah, yes, love. Oh, okay, darling. Yes. No,
he's known for reading the Harry Potter audiobooks as well, isn't he? So he does that obviously with female characters. So there's not really much else you can do, is there? You know, you can't unless you're a master of doing all these different voices. I mean, I don't know how else.
So she comes off as a bit of a wet blanket in places, to be honest with you. But that's Fleming writing women at this point. But he does prove through the series he can write women. That's a funny thing. But Bond falls in love with her against his better judgment, really.
In his defence, I mean, she does turn out. There is a reason, could be good reason, because she is like a double agent.
A double agent, yeah.
She is,
so she's a bit like. She's a bit.
And
like,
again. They really have thought about how to present that information. So we are going a bit all over the place here, but it's pointless going through the plot strictly sequentially. But of course, in the film, he's on the phone to Judi Dench, and Judi Dench, he's just resigned, and Judi Dench says, "We'll talk about that later," and explains Vesper's backstory. She was in love with this guy. He was captured, and she was forced into what she did. She did love you, James. That's why she led you to Mr. White. In the book, it is a suicide letter. You can't really do that in the book. You can't just have her found dead in her suite and then Bond silently reads a letter in her voice. That's too much like a TV film. So that's the difference. So again, having won the game, they go for a meal. That's very similar. And then they go and stay in like, and then they stay in like he's beaten, isn't he? He's beaten in the same way. She's kidnapped. And he drives after her. It's much, much longer in the book. He's pursuing them for ages and at a greater distance. And she is in the back of the car with her skirt tied up over her head. Let's only hope she was wearing pants.
I just we reviewed this a while ago on some part of a small book group on Instagram, and we said exactly the same thing. We were like, I hope she's wearing underwear.
Yeah, because it would look ridiculous. But anyway, they lay
some detailed description of the undercarriage.
Yeah, they lay a trap across the road, don't they? That's what they do, and they blow his tyres out. And they destroy his car, and then they drag him away to be punished, to be beaten with a carpet beater, similar to the film, but probably more brutal, and ends with him having a Cyrillic W shape carved into his hand.
Yeah, so he gets a scar on the back of his hand.
It's to identify him as a SMERSH agent, as a spy to SMERSH agents. There is some. We'll see in the next book. There's been plastic surgery on that, which the only way it's noticeable is sort of his hair grows slightly the wrong way.
Yeah, he has a skin graft, doesn't he?
Skin graft.
So it'd be kind of cool if next Bond actually has like some sort of weird sort of skin graft mark on his hand. A lot of attention to detail.
With his villains and things like obviously with Fleming, they are obviously invariably foreign or scarred or have some kind of imperfection. And it's interesting that obviously with Bond it's the same. He's got that scar-ish kind of like down his cheek, and like in the film Life in Russia of Love, for example, we see he's got the scar on his back. And then obviously in the literary Bond, he has got that scarring, that graft on his hand as well. So it's quite interesting there.
Well, I kind of thought this because one of the points is like this again. Dark Lord place. This is towards the end of the book. The guy that's following both Bond and Vesper is like wearing like an eye patch or type thing,
as in the film.
Yeah, exactly like the film. Exact same name as well, which is a nice little attention to detail.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he pops up again.
But how just casually Bond just sort of goes, "Oh, he looks like any other normal guy." I don't know what you. I mean, like, but to us,
could be anybody.
But to us, it's like he just looks like this is so blatantly like so like. looks like all villain. But then again, you're thinking like, well, this is not long after the war. Surely most men of a certain age would probably have seen war and it wouldn't be that unusual to have like some sort of injuries.
They're probably going to have something, aren't they, or
It
PTSD or something like that.
It wouldn't be a shock. You did have that in First World War where people had these sort of coverings on their face instead of like plastic surgery, so it didn't really exist. Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that kind of came out as well. It's the same with any sort of like, well, not same with any sort of warfare, but it's usually kind of something like that would have come out of like warfare and that sort of thing. Like if you go to like Imperial War Museum, for example, there's a small section of kind of all the kind of like prosthetics and the development of that that came out of like especially First World War and Second World War as well. I mean, they kind of look not very sophisticated to our eye, to more modern sensibilities. But you know, back then that was probably like cutting edge. And yeah, as you say, coming out of the Second World War, for example, as well. I think you're perfectly right. You know, that sort of thing probably would have been a lot more common.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that sometimes like that kind of gets lost in translation sometimes with time. You know, so it's like, oh, of course, yeah, because you know there probably would be more like injuries and things like that. But it would be sort of this would probably be like a bit more like the norm. But it is a bit more of a striking image to sort of think like, you know, how towards the end of the film, how Bond's just completely just like, it's nothing, it's fine. You know, how like, especially how Vesper's acting incredibly suspicious, and Bond does kind of like say,
I find the third act, if you think of it in film terms, if we talk about it probably isn't a 3-act structure, but if you think of it as a 3-act, the third act really starts with Bond's in hospital after this beating, and he really does have this sort of internal monologue about the whole morality of the Cold War, and you know, is anyone particularly, you know, and he's already talking of his intention to resign, so it isn't just about a woman, although it is partly that. And Vesper visits him in hospital. He seems to be in hospital a long time, and he's now like, and she, when he gets out, she sort of found this guest house for him, this little quiet place. And she just shows him all the love he wants. He's not sure about the job, and he just does think there's more to life. But she starts getting very twitchy. You know, a car will go past this house, and she's absolutely sure she's being followed, and it is actually this guy Gettler. And she's just up and down in mood, and it's just Bond is just distraught because he's losing her to something, and he's not sure what. And one minute she's all over him, the next minute she's really silent and not talking, and he's going off and like having a swim in the sea by himself, which is a little bit like I suppose the start of No Time to Die, where they're both fond of doing that. And you know, one morning, you know, and then they have one night of lovemaking, which when you know what's going to be happening right next in the book, you can sort of see you can see her last night of him before she kills herself. And she basically leaves a note. She's working for the Soviets, and they've kidnapped her lover, which in this case was a Polish guy. And he'd given information about her, and then they've blackmailed her to do this mission. And the mission, it was kidnapping. The kidnapping was fake. And she's now realised she's never going to be free of this guy. And so she's killed herself.
Spoiler alert.
And when he calls into the London liaison, which is just someone not that familiar with the mission who just passes on messages, and he just says, yeah, 3030 was a double, which was her name, and he said, yeah, the bitch is dead now. Double
working for Redland.
Yeah.
I like how they use that line in the film as well. I think it's a nice touch. But I remember going to see it at the cinema. It was packed. I think it was obviously when the first day came out or something. And obviously, you know, we all sort of laughed and knowingly at the various kind of references all the way through and everything. And I remember like, oh yeah, she was a double agent. The bitch is dead, blah, blah. And then like Craig said that line, and then somebody let out this huge laugh, and it was just the most inappropriate thing. I was like, oh my god. Idiot.
And the thing is, the reason I've talked about it as a sort of self-contained act is because of that, because the act starts with Bond saying, what is the morality of this anyway? There's got to be more to life. And I think he knows under it all he's already starting to fall for Vesper. He's certainly fixating on her a lot. And the act ends with him trying to convince himself his sort of cold heart as iced up again. That he's just like, it doesn't matter, she's dead. But the very fact that he wants to go after the people that did this, the hand that holds the whip, as it's described, and Barbara and Michael talk about it when they made the film as well. The hand that holds the whip says that he did give everything of himself over to her, and he's been betrayed. So he is now straight back on mission, basically, and he has to convince himself he didn't care. And repeatedly through the series, we'll see Bond did care. Bond did care about Carla Brand. He did care to some degree about Honey Rider. He did fall for Tracy. So Bond.
I think Vesper's kind of like the blueprint almost.
Well, the Tracy takes the role in the film spiritually, because Casino Royale didn't exist, which means that it's not a mark against Connery, but it's just that the film that explains why Bond is the way he is happens after all the sort of classic Connery entries.
Definitely, but I just meant in terms of the novels. That's all.
Yeah,
obviously Tracy is the main one for sure.
And the book captured it. The film captured what the book was trying to do. But the book made it all about love because it's a film, whereas the novel was able to have that internal dialogue that this is all shades of grey anyway, because the Cold War was very like that. And if you think about I alluded to it earlier, the Cold War more generally was about spheres of influence. There were very few parts of the world we were willing to take on communist regimes in, because we were like, well, you can have this bit and we'll have that bit. The morality of it was rather grey to begin with. And Bond recognises this, but having been hurt, he just effectively denies that to himself.
Mm.
But the last sort of 20, 30 pages of I'm going to go after the people that did this is quite hard-hitting.
Yeah, because, well, as you say, it's got these... There's nothing left now other than just like, right, well, on to the next job. It's like, this is what I'm going to do now, which is in a way, it's been quite, I want to say it's not cliche, because I think this kind of sets the benchmark for it. I think this has been
Bad
done.
luck, Bond, you loved her.
No, but this is probably like sort of set the standard for this kind of thing, though, because one of the things why Bond is so should we say blindsided in the last part of the book is because he's kind of like, I don't want to sort of read into it, and now he's kind of like put himself away. He's found this found love for life, and now he's skeptical of the whole spy thing. He's a bit like, it's all a bit, what is good and bad really. I mean, just kind of, you give yourself and blah, all this kind of thing.
But even that is Bond talking to himself. We don't really know. It's open to interpretation how much he believes that bit. Just as the bit of, I don't want Vesper here because she's a woman, just as that could be him trying to convince himself, that bit could be as well. And the bitch is dead at the end definitely is. Yeah,
because definitely with the, the old pots and pans line, that is literally him, that line of dialogue is said...
because he's annoyed, because he could be distracted now.
Well, yeah, because he's actively... This is just after Vesper's been kidnapped, so he's actively chasing her, and he's like, why can't they just fucking stay out of it?
Yeah.
Then I wouldn't have to be like jeopardise the mission, because he's saying things like, if she gets killed, that's her luck, kind of thing. Well, at the same time, he's actively trying to save her. So it's a bit of a contradiction in terms. He's like saying, like, if you really didn't care, you wouldn't have bothered. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Of course, the other thing that occurs to me is he took the name from, everyone knows this story, he took the name James Bond from a book he had on birds of the West Indies, which he used to use to birdwatch in Jamaica when he was there.
Yeah, is it his main ornithologist?
But I love when they interviewed him about it. He said, I thought that was a very quiet name, like Peregrine Carruthers. And I was thinking, imagine if he'd gone with Peregrine Carruthers. And Daniel Craig is
in
Peregrine
the 30s
Carruthers.
and 40s, you had like Sexton Blake, so you could have had names Carruthers.
Carruthers.
Or even if they'd gone with some of the cover names.
That's a very English name, isn't it?
I know.
I'm pretty sure in one of the
Daniel Craig is James St. John Smythe.
St. John Smythe, yeah. I want to say that it might not be. Maybe in one of the Charlie Higson continuation novels. I'm pretty sure one of the continuation novels does pick up on that name, and there is a character called Peregrine somewhere along the line.
I do
I'm not
have
quite sure.
Silverfin on audiobook. I need to listen to it sometime. I might next.
It might be on there.
I'm
but I
currently
don't
listening
think-
to.
yeah, unfortunately.
Just off the point, I'm currently listening to. All right, it's about 18 hours long, and I've got about 5 hours left, so I'm like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through. I'm listening to Patrick Stewart's autobiography.
Ooh.
He voices it himself, and it's really good because he's really only just started on Star Trek. So normally, when you read an autobiography, there's a part of you thinking, "Hurry up and get famous." I remember Frank Skinner saying that when he wrote his own book. How much do you really want to read about someone's childhood? And I must say, I was utterly captivated by his childhood, by the sort of Royal Shakespeare Company years, all of that. So it's really good, by the way. But yeah, I might try give Silverfin a go
He's had quite an
afterwards.
interesting life, hasn't he?
Is it good, Silverfin?
Yes, I highly recommend it. Definitely check out you guys as well, but also listeners as well. If this is your first diving into Bond, or if you've read all the novels or continuation novels, do get in touch with us. Let us know what is your favourite. But yeah, if you're diving into Bond and starting with Fleming, if you want to read more, I highly recommend obviously read all the Flemings. But I can highly recommend the continuation authors as well. John Gardner.
Do that. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to hang off on Live and Let Die because even if we did that next, we've got a whole series in the way. But I might give Silverfin a go just to see.
Yeah, definitely check out. Yeah, Charlie Higson does kind of go. Obviously, you've got Charlie Higson and Steve Cole going to young Bond books, which are fantastic because they kind of go into his younger days, sort of as a teenager, that sort of thing. First time going away from Aunt Charmian, and sort of. You learn more about his backstory and that sort of thing.
Because he may have been retrofitted as Scottish, but he was largely brought up in Kent after his parents died. So it makes sense that he's Anglo.
Ancestry for sure.
Yeah, he wouldn't necessarily have a Scottish accent, and that's why half of his childhood was spent in Kent. It could be. You could play it either way. Daniel Craig is as valid as like Sean Connery, if you like, because you could lean into the Scottishness or away from it because he was out of Scotland before his teens.
No, that's it. It just depends, doesn't it? So, but yeah, in a word, yes. But yeah, definitely go and check out all the continuation novels and also the Young Bond novels. Really fantastic. Now. So
I'm going to download it now. I'm going to listen to that.
Do it.
All right. I've got it. I've just. I only download
what I want to listen to.
A
YA audience, probably about 8, 10, 11, 12. So they whip along, at a really fantastic pace. But yeah, if you like Charlie Higson, I can recommend Steve Cole's books as well.
Yeah, I think they sort of he took over after Charlie Higson went, didn't he? But yes, Bond at school.
I can just recommend all the Bond books generally.
But but I mean, if you stick to most of the ones that are in the sort of Fleming timeline are good in my opinion, most of them. But I would say the closest, the ones that we mentioned earlier, and I've blanked again, Horowitz is probably the closest to Fleming for me. A lot of people really like the Colonel's Son one. I just think like the start of it. I like. Spoiler alert: M is kidnapped in that, and that sequence of it is really really good. The rest of it I could take or leave.
Colonel's Son's it's a bit different as well because it's a bit of an outlier. Again, that's a bit of a chunky tome.
It's at the end of his career, but a lot of the other ones around there I'm not that keen on. Raymond Benson's a very good as a sort of Brosnan era.
I think he's fab. Literally, he's probably oh my gosh, I was.
But he's not like Fleming.
So
he's like Brosnan, the books of missions you didn't see.
No, he's very much kind of brings Bond. So obviously you had John Gardner bringing Bond into Kicking and Screaming into the 80s. They are very 80s.
He drove a Saab and smoked silk.
He drove a Saab and
silk cut. James Bond.
Q has an assistant called Q apostrophe UT.
I don't smoke anymore, but I'm offended by that. Silk cut.
Silk cut. It's the 1980s, you know.
What sort of thing would James Bond smoke? What?
I think he would still smoke.
It's Morley's with his three rings,
he would either smoke. Bespoke,
would he vape these days?
Or
he wouldn't vape. No.
He'd smoke Gauloise.
Gauloise.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know.
If he was smoking off the shelf cigarettes, that's what it would be.
I don't think he would though. He'd go back to his Turkish blend with the three rings.
But yeah, that's the actual real answer. He'd have to make for it.
Whatever they're called. Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't smoke,
Moreland,
so I don't know.
Moreland with the gold band on them.
I don't smoke at all. But I wouldn't vape. I can't see it.
So not Richmond
I really
Super
can't
Kings
see
then.
it.
Yeah, red band. Yeah.
So,
Camel.
Camel. Or a cigar. He might take a leaf out of Roger's book and smoke up a big cigar. But yeah, no, as I say, as John Gardner was very 1980s. Obviously, Fleming was very.
I've still got some of those
50s,
to listen
60s.
to be fair. What's the first one? License Revoked, isn't it?
Yes.
No, is
Yeah,
it
really good.
No, License Renewed. Sorry, I'm thinking of the original name of the film. License Renewed is the first John Gardner one. And the whole thinking behind the book was, imagine Bond had been frozen and then like everyone unthawed in the 80s.
It's a bit weird. It is a little bit
I
strange.
might give that a go as well. But
But
I would
yeah, the romance is very much obviously Bond for the 90s, and it's a lot more cinematic, it's a lot more kind of like broad in its scope as well.
It is the Brosnan films as books. It's Brosnan in missions you never got films of, basically.
But he also did a lot of novelizations as well. Sorry, obviously like Tomorrow Never Dies, Die Another Day, that sort of thing. Goldeneye.
I don't like novelizations in general.
I think that's quite interesting. So I was really lucky to meet him.
He doesn't count it the same either. We all know Raymond a little bit just from like social media, and he
definitely
doesn't count them as the same either.
Well, they're all different, aren't they? They're all different. And there's more, some kind of follow on, but some don't as well. But I think some of the novelizations have been okay. To be honest, I've not read them for a long time. Most recent one I read.
I've read everything. I've
literally read all the books. But
I've read everything set in the
recently.
50s. Everything set in the 50s and 60s, with the exception of the most recent Horowitz, which I still haven't got round to because it's at the end. So
you really must. I'm sorry, but you really must get around to reading them. They are fantastic. I highly recommend it.
Tempted to listen to it after we finish with Fleming.
Yeah, do it. I highly recommend it.
What's it called again?
It'll change your opinion. It will change your opinion for sure.
What's its name? I've forgotten.
Which one?
I've got it. The most recent Horowitz.
Oh, isn't it?
With the Mind to Kill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's set at the end of his career because he'd done one at the one in the middle and one at the beginning.
Yes.
But my favourite.
Yeah, it's recently come out in paperback.
Trigger Mortis is good and it's got good racing sequence in it, but Forever in a Day's great. If it's I'd start there. Honestly,
like,
if you've never read Bond,
you can read it before Casino Royale, can't you? It's kind of like the prequel almost.
Because we're used to origin stories now in our films and stuff. It's nice as an origin story before you get to Casino Royale.
I wonder if they do eventually reboot Bond, that's probably where they'll go. I can imagine. If they're going to do a literary adaptation, I don't know, but or if they're going to wipe slate completely.
What's the female in it called? Agent 16.
Agent 16. I can't remember her name off the top of my head.
It's really good. It's really good.
Really got to check it out.
And it's read by Matthew Good as well, isn't it?
1980s and Benson bringing it screaming into the 1990s for sure.
So, Chris, having now finally done a Fleming, would you recommend it?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a bit of an odd experience for me because it's like again, it's like reading a book which you already kind of know. Before reading it, I could probably explain in broad terms what happens in it.
You could at least give the bits that you don't think would be not just in the film, if you know what I mean. You'd go, well, there'd definitely be the card game. I bet he loses the money. I bet he's tortured. I bet
you can kind of see those beats, can't you?
Vesper will betray him. He'll probably say the bitch is dead. So you might get, if you had to guess, you'd probably get the card game wrong. And you might, if you had to guess, you would say...
You can see there's a Casino Royale bingo sheet that you're kind of laying down for Chris.
I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know how he lost the money, but you probably wouldn't guess. You'd go, well, it's Le Chiffre trying to make money back.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was like, sort of... I had one mind of like, there's reading it, and the other mind was sort of like, oh, how is this different from everything else that I know? And a lot of it was particularly in terms of like how Bond is as well.
He's not entirely likable. I think Craig captured that aspect, even though he was much more.
That's the whole
action.
point. He's not meant to be, even though he's the true hero. Sorry to jump in, but I think that's the whole point. Fleming's written him that way. That he's, he is a sexist, misogynist dinosaur.
That's why I think Connery was so close, because Connery got it. Connery had a bit of brutality to him. I don't think, as much as Dalton fits the look and the world weariness, he's too nice.
Yeah, he hasn't got that kind of. I mean, he obviously did a lot of stunts and everything, but he hasn't got that cool streak. I would say
he's brilliant, by the way. I love Dalton, but
Dalton's fantastic. Definitely.
I would say controversially,
it was definitely missing from Roger Moore and Pierce Brosnan.
I think Sean Connery is closer to Ian Fleming's James Bond than Dalton is.
That's not controversial at all. I think that's accepted.
Yeah, but everyone goes, no, the literary one is
I think that's why Connery remains so popular. I mean,
Dalton's
obviously
close, but he's nice.
I think that's. I wouldn't say that's controversial personally. I think that's kind of why I think that's kind of why he is so popular, and he consistently tops kind of lists of who's your favourite Bond, who's the best Bond, that sort of thing, because of that closeness, because he did kind of get that aspect to him. And I think that's probably why people like sort of Bros.
The bit in Russia with Love where he says,
for example, kind of didn't capture that, or didn't feel it was appropriate at the time to have that aspect to it. Obviously, there are times like with Roger Moore, we kind of saw obviously twisting Andrea Under's arm and things like that.
Yeah, but that weren't him, was
slapping
that was
people.
That was him trying to figure him out. The point I was going to make was where she says in From Russia with Love to him, will you make love to me? And he goes, yeah, day and night. And I'm just thinking, that is so Ian Fleming's James Bond. That's just fucking women.
Day and night. What about
yeah.
No, but the thing that got me about it though is like, I mean, I got the coldness. I mean, I think I knew that was going. He's like, all like very sort of cold and sort of on the job. But it's also like the parts of these look just a bit like world weary. It seems to be a bit more like, as we alluded to before with the conversation about like good and evil. He's very much like, yeah, it's a bit all grey, isn't it? It's all very like sort of, I don't know, this kind of thing. These kind of things that I sort of wasn't quite expecting, and particularly with the gushy romance stuff. How Bond is kind of like just almost like swept away. I wasn't sort of expecting Bond to be kind of like full on like in denial about certain things.
But he does the married women thing exactly the same as in the film, and it's why, because there's no emotional entanglement.
Yeah, it's like friends with benefits.
The other thing I thought was nice is actually having like an official character to Felix Leiter. Oh, okay, well, here's an actual take.
Rounded sort of like 3D character, isn't he? So
yeah, it's just,
I would agree.
It's not just like it's just another actor popping up who it's just all right. Generic American ally.
Generic Bond ally.
Here's a bit more of like, here's an actual, like, here's the actual sort of a character of what he's supposed to be like. That was nice to see, or read, I should say. But yeah, no, But to answer your question, yes, I would recommend it.
And so, yeah, we will be doing more of these in the future. The next one is not going to be for a while, but it's Live and Let Die, which the language is one thing, what terms you use, but it's actually more Fleming's observations on the black man, which are a little bit awkward. But I think what I'll do is, when I read it, I will try to pretty much ignore that. I might mention it up front, and then we'll forget about it and talk about the story and the characters. So in some respects, I'm looking forward to revisiting it, because as I go through them, I tend to skip that one. And it's not because I'm some fucking snowflake. It's nothing to do with that. It's just I find it a bit distasteful. It's just like there's no point in reading it. But as we're sort of introducing Chris for the first time, I will, and I'll read it with a very open mind. My memory of the first few books is that I kind of alternated. I liked one and then didn't like the next one so much. And the third one's Moonraker, which is brilliant. Nothing like the film. They've just taken the title and the name of the bad guy. That's about it. So, yeah, we'll come back to these.
Yeah, they do kind of diverge a little bit, don't they, as well? So, but yeah, so it's one of those, again, it's very much kind of its time. We do have to kind of go in and keep an open mind, shall we say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was interesting listening to the audio, but to see if there's anything that's edited out, anything that's cut out.
Nope, not to my knowledge. It's read by Rory Kinnear.
Okay, let us know, Chris. Let us know.
Yeah, it's read by Rory Kinnear, and he has to say all the slightly dated language.
I will say, Casino Royale is actually read by Dan Stevens, the one I listened to, and
he would have been a great Bond.
Yeah, and he does a good job. He in terms of the sound, it like the how he reads the character, it is exactly how you'd picture it. So makes you wonder.
They do vary. I mean, they On Her Majesty's Secret Service is read by David Tennant. in his native language, in his native accent.
In his Scottish accent.
Martin Jarvis does one. Rory Kinnear does one. There's a few. Years ago, I went on a holiday and I took the audio, a previous version of the Casino Royale audiobook with me, and it was read by Rufus Sewell.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's a set that you can buy. Casino Royale, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, and Diamonds Are Forever. And it's kind of like a 4-disc set that you can buy. I think one is read by Hugh Carshi as well. One is read by Rosamund Pike.
Toby Stevens does one, I think.
Toby Stevens does one. That's
Jason Isaacs does Thunderball.
Good.
Thunderball is part of the trilogy that does have Spectre in it. Let me just type up.
It's a Spectre trilogy.
Looking for. Hang on a minute. Because there is a series of them, and they call, for example, Forever and a Day is listed as book 0 because it comes before.
Yeah, because it introduces. So it is a Spectre trilogy.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the series it's part of. Hang on. It was easier on the app. On the website, it's not actually there. But you could. Oh yeah, James Bond: The Collection.
Yeah,
so Forever and a Day, book 0. Casino Royale, I'll run you through them. Is Dan Stevens. Live and Let Die is Rory Kinnear. Moonraker is Bill Nighy. You can buy it in Hindi as well.
With Bill Nighy doing the...
Damian Lewis does Diamonds Are Forever.
Oh yes, I forgot about him.
Toby Stevens from Russia with Love. Hugh Quarshie, Dr. No. Hugh Bonville, Goldfinger.
Oh.
For Your Eyes Only is Samuel West. Anyone listening who doesn't know who Samuel West is, he's a character actor you'll have seen in a lot of stuff, but his mum is Prunella Scales.
He's
best known for Fawlty Towers, and his dad's Timothy West, yeah. Thunderball, Jason Isaacs. The Spy Who Loved Me, Rosamund Pike. I really like that book, but it is a curiosity. David Tennant, Majesties. Martin Jarvis, You Only Live Twice. I don't think
Martin Jarvis.
The Man with the Golden Gun, Kenneth Branagh.
Oh, Ken Branagh.
That's quite a name to get.
Yeah, that's a big coup.
Octopussy and The Living Daylights and Other Stories is Tom Hiddleston and Lucy Fleming.
Ooh.
Simon Vance does a load of the John Gardner ones. I don't know.
I'm not sure who Simon Vance is.
Nor am I.
Unfortunately, I'm sure he's very good, but I'm not familiar with him.
Actually, he seems to do all of them. I'm going through them here, and it's all of them.
He reads them all.
Yeah.
Martin Jarvis is perhaps. I don't know.
And he does.
If you've listened, let us know.
And he does.
Chris and Dave, have you listened to the audio adventures on like Radio 4 and that, for example?
No, I haven't.
You gotta check them out. Oh my god, they're so good.
So Simon Vance is the most prolific because he does all the those as well. License Renewed. There's also a version done by Jeremy Northam. I don't know which one I've got. Devil May Care is Jeremy Northam. Carte Blanche is Toby Stevens. Solo is Dominic West.
Ooh.
Trigger Mortis is David Oyelowo. With a Mind to Kill is Rory Kinnear.
Nice.
And that's all the ones.
So a wealth of talent when it comes to the audiobooks for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to check out. Literally, they're all. You can listen to them for free on YouTube. Check out the BBC radio dramas as well. Star-studded cast.
I will be doing that as well.
Yeah, they're really good. You can stick them on in the background whilst you're doing your homework or looking after the little one.
I'm surprised there's quite a few of them because there's one of The Exorcist as well.
Yes.
So
there is it's in my wish. I don't know if it's still in my wish list. There is a thing that years ago, quite often, the stars of major films would voice them for radio.
Yeah, they would.
So
in
my list is Hollywood Playhouse, the Oscars collection, right? And the narrators include, I'll read you which ones in a minute, but narrator Ingrid Bergman, Bogart, Claudette Colbert, Gary Cooper, Bing Crosby, Bette Davis.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, Clark Gable, Greer Garson, Cary Grant, Sidney Greenstreet, Catherine Hepburn, William Holden, and it includes Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, It's a Wonderful Life, All About Eve, Rebecca, It Happened One Night, and so on. There's loads of them.
I was going to say, I didn't know there was an adaptation of It Happened One Night.
Yeah. It Happened One Night, for anyone who's not seen it. It's a great film. And
it's one of the first Oscar winners, I think, wasn't it?
So yeah, radio dramas were quite common. And actually, I've done a few like Blu-ray disc reviews where there will be a version of it. I definitely remember there being one of the African Queen.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not something that's so common anymore. But yeah, can highly recommend the Bond radio dramas for sure because like they have star-studded cast. I think Dr. No has like David Suchet or something like that is like known for playing Poirot. It's like, oh my gosh, and now he's playing Dr. No. But yeah, to have Martin Jarvis narrating the audiobooks, he's known. He sort of plays the narrator in the radio dramas, and also Ian Fleming sort of does any sort of narration there, so he's probably best known for that. But also, listeners, if you've not listened to any of the radio dramas, I'm just going to bang on about them because they are fantastic. Toby Stephens, he's a much better Bond than he was Gustav Graves. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It really is. And he's a fantastic radio Bond, and does the role a huge amount of justice. So highly recommend it for sure. And there's quite, I think, maybe all of them, most of them have been done. Probably like an hour and a half. Won't take up too much of your time. Amazing, yeah, definitely, and some are hilarious as well. And I think one of the earliest ones, 1990. 1991, 1990. Anyway, Michael Jaston from Doctor Who plays Bond, and also got Maxine Audley in it as well. Adaptation of You Only Live Twice, which is incredible. Portrayal of who's the ally in it. He's got the fake leg.
What, Leiter?
No, in You Only Live Twice.
Oh, and You Only Live Twice.
Charles Gray's character. I can't remember his name.
Oh, sorry.
Dicko Henderson.
Dicko Henderson.
Yeah, is very broad Australian character. Lots of swears. It's quite sweary, so I'll warn you now that's slightly not safe for work. But yeah, just another plug for
But again, who goes to work and sticks it on a Bluetooth speaker or something? They'll have it.
Well, in case you've got an earbud, an earpod in, stick it in. But yeah, just to kind of recommend that as well. But yeah, check out obviously the continuation novels, audiobooks. I need to get onto the audiobook bandwagon for Bond because I've got a CD collection of the first four, and that's about it, unfortunately.
I do find you have
and then get onto the radio dramas for sure.
Sometimes with audiobooks, I realise I've not listened for the last 10 minutes. So with Patrick Stewart, I've been really, really concentrating, and it's really rewarding. But yeah, it's not as passive as you would think.
You have to get in. You get stuck into it, don't you?
Yeah. You have to work at it though. It's a
you
bit
have to
of
pay attention. 007.
Yeah.
But again, it's like it's the same issue I have with books though as well. Like sometimes you start reading, then before you know it, you've gone through like a couple of pages, and you're just like, I don't think I absorbed any of that.
And you drift off.
Yeah. So I think it's depends on who you are, but I think it's I think you can have the same issues really.
At least you got Fleming with the books, because he said that he starts describing her nipples, and all of a sudden you're back.
We'll describe her boobs and then be like, oh. all the blokes would be like,
you remember the Naked Gun 2, where they all fell asleep listening to that environmental guy, and then like O.J. Simpson starts reading them like a sex scene from a Mills and Boon book or something. They're all suddenly awake.
You'll get that sexy description and be like,
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded that scene in Austin Powers where like where he's like where he's just got married to what's her name, Vanessa.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's there like talking about, you had cracking breasts, I knew how to have you there and there.
Yeah.
All this guy, he just some of the stuff kind of reminds me of that, but obviously
it is a little bit like that. Unfortunately, all the kind of like these tropes that dot these films. This is kind of where it all happened, really, and it's just there are some cringe-inducing moments.
Is it your favourite book or one of your favourite books, Becca?
It's probably one of my favourites, not just in Bond, but probably like all time. I know that's really, really cheesy, but that's just as like a Bond nerd. But I think just in terms of like spy fiction and that as well. I mean, it's kind of like there was the likes of Le Carré and Dayton and those sort of really sort of classic sort of spy novels, and also like Joseph Conrad and that, for example. It just kind of dials into the kind of like the fears and sort of themes and that at the time. I won't go on anymore, but I did have a couple of passages that I wanted to read out, but I won't now because we're going on for too long. But yeah, no, I would probably say it's up there with one of my favourite novels ever. But it was quite eclectic, really, quite an eclectic mix.
What about it specifically? Is it just like a personal thing of your? Do you think it's like, it's just because I'm just connected to it because of the Bond, or?
Yeah, well, I like, obviously, apart from the sexism and racism and obviously towards
and all that good stuff.
Yeah, obviously I don't agree with that. That is really bad. But obviously I just come to looking at it through through a sort of modern lens. But I think like there's a bit of conflation as well. Obviously I think Fleming had he's a really interesting character. I think he has such quite interesting life. And you can see that so much of Bond is almost as a little bit of wish fulfillment there as well. A lot of his own characters infused with Bond. That's as we said at the top of the show, it's kind of pretty much almost like projecting what his kind of hopes and fears and what he really wanted to do and what to achieve, and like the sort of glamorous life that he sort of lived, with just like a little bit of sort of spin on it as well. I think he writes, the pace kind of whips along as well. I mean, some of the descriptions, obviously Bond is a massive snob, so is Ian Fleming. You've got to have the right wine with your fish sort of thing, and woe betide you if you drink red wine or a particular brand, if you smoke the wrong cigarettes or if you drive the wrong car, if you wear the wrong clothes, and that's a black mark forever against your name. Obviously one is a massive snob. I think sort of pacing is really quite well paced as well. The character's really well rounded. Sorry, I can't speak. Obviously there are a lot of stereotypes, especially there's a scene where Bond basically looks around the table and is basically kind of stereotype after stereotype, and just think, oh, really? But I think in terms of, because I'm quite into like spy fiction as well, obviously getting into it through Bond.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it quickly.
There's a bit in the book where he's describing the people around the table, and it's like, it's something like, the Oriental guy won't be very good because they're crap at cards. Where is it? I try and find it. No. Anyway, yeah, it is literally in there somewhere.
He does go into a bit more description, doesn't he? He goes like, well, they'll play safe, or and things like that, or and then they'll do this the first half, but then because they're French they'll do this, or because he's American he'll do that, and he'll behave in this way. So that's pretty bad. But also I think I will read this little bit out. So it's also obviously very much kind of a novel of sort of the post-war, kind of like obviously going into the Cold War and that as well. It still speaks a lot to the politics at the time. So he says, of course, he added, Mathis started to expostulate. Patriotism comes along and makes it seem fairly all right, but this country, right or wrong business, is getting a little out of date. Today we are fighting communism. Okay, if I'd been alive 50 years ago, the brand of conservatism we have today would be damn near called communism, and we should have been told to go and fight that. History is moving pretty quickly these days, and although heroes and villains keep on changing parts, that's still relevant today. So again, I absolutely agree.
It's very much kind of at once of its time and also very prescient as well. And I think that's kind of what keeps it fresh as well. I mean, that's why Bond is so popular. It's like Doctor Who, his face keeps changing every so often. Regeneration is the key. But I think that's why, because even though it's very much a time capsule, it just kind of it's kind of very updated in that sort of way as well. I mean, obviously, as we found out in the Bosnian era, lies, governments change and lies stay the same. It's pretty much sort of the same thing, really, isn't it? But I think that's part of why it appeals. So it certainly appeals to me as well.
Here comes a new boss, just like the old.
Yeah, so, to quote the Who, definitely. Here comes a new boss, same as the old boss, pretty much the same. So, but yeah, lots of different factors, really. Yeah, aside from the sexism and casual racism. And the violence, but yeah, and I think it's pacey. I do like the description, a bit over the top in places, I know, and the paciness of it really kind of whips along, and it's just a great piece of spy fiction, really, which is a genre I'm quite interested in for sure. But they are very hit and miss, and it's not everyone isn't a winner. It's not like they're sort of consistently great, but there are a few that are kind of up there, that have been lauded as classics. But yeah, that's kind of like why it's one of my faves, really. I probably might rank it like 4th or 5th, or like in top 5. I don't know. It changes all the time. So, like at the minute, like one of the books that I am reading at the minute is one that I tend to go back, God, so many times a year. I think this is probably my favourite book of all time. So, and sadly, it's not Casino Royale, unfortunately, but it is in the top 5 for sure. So it's a very long answer there. Sorry about that.
So in short, yes. Yeah, so I like it. It's among my favourites. My other favourites in no particular order were Moonraker. I really liked From Russia with Love. I liked Goldfinger. A lot of people don't like Goldfinger the book, but I really did. and I really liked On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but that was one of those where I was listening to the audiobook and not concentrating as well as I should. So I need to reevaluate that, because it is my favourite of the films. My favourite of the books, I will say right now, was From Russia with Love, which is one of the most famous, faithful adaptations, apart from it not being SMERSH, of course. And
Didn't it make it into Kennedy's top 10?
It did.
It
made it
they really
into his top 10
launched.
books. It's superb. It's a really good book, and it fleshes out all the bits you'd want fleshed out in a book, but it's still really faithful. So it's very good. But we'll see how we get on with them as we go through. The next one, as I say, Live and Let Die. A lot of the early books and a lot of the Connery films are very faithful, but one or two aren't, and Live and Let Die is not super faithful. It's got some of the same stuff. Okay, so as for social media, you can find me at the Pastor Kid 1976 on Twitter.
You can find me at Simmertronics. You can find all the old episodes at I forgot where on Podbean. I forgot where we were there.
We're everywhere, to be fair.
Yeah, but yeah. If you just Google it, you'll come across something or in your podcast place of interest.
On your podcatcher.
Yes.
On your podcatcher of choice.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and you find us everywhere. Do you expect us to talk on Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days? At Expect Us to Talk. You can drop us an email, expectusttalk@gmail.com. You can always, wherever you are on the platform, podcatcher of choice, Spotify, YouTube. Just type in Do You Expect Us to Talk? You can find us there generally. Don't forget wherever platform, where you can find us. Sorry,
you won't find me at like the Knickers in like Ann Summers or something. We're not
in the lingerie department.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll find you in the 00 section. So whichever platform you're listening to us on, don't forget to give us a glowing 5-star review, and hopefully leave us a little review where you can as well. And also, if you have to be on social media, why not just do a status update? Oh, I'm listening to Do You Expect Us to Talk? And post that as a tweet, as an update, just to let your friends know what you're listening to. Who knows, they might listen to us as well. Whatever platform you're listening on, hope us to give us a glowing 5-star review. Help us to rank a little bit higher in the listings and attract more lovely listeners like yourself.
So we are coming up to a series Becca has wanted to do since day one of this podcast. Becca, introduce
Apart from Bond.
Apart from Bond, yeah. This is your series, designed as you wish, and whatever you're gonna take us through as we go through it. We've got a list of.
Hang on, so what we do the human centipede?
Yeah,
yes,
all
how
three
did
of
you
them.
know?
Yeah. That's why Becca's always saying you mustn't go ass to mouth. Bit of a catchphrase of hers.
I think that's probably going to be one series that you get Charlie on to replace me, because I will be like, that's one of those films like I'm only ever going to see once.
I've not seen it, and I'm not going to.
It's like Requiem for a Dream. I've seen that film once, and it was amazing. It was fantastic, but harrowing. But I'm never going to see it again.
Christ, the audiobook of Bleak House is 43 hours long.
Fucking hell, excuse my language.
So I was just looking because the Pickwick Papers was narrated by Rory Kinnear as well.
Well,
but anyway,
they are epic tomes.
Dracula's quite long, but that's done as like all journal blog. So
okay.
Yeah.
How
does Frankenstein compare? Because that's kind of letters within letters within letters. Like
I don't know. I've not listened to it.
The Audible edition is actually only 15 hours and 27 minutes.
It's not that long,
so bad. It's not that bad.
Listeners, what's the longest audiobook you've ever listened to? Or indeed, what's the longest book you've ever read? I mean, does War and Peace or Les Miserables equate to hours upon hours upon hours? What's the longest? And by contrast, what's the shortest?
There's a few different versions of Dracula, actually, and they're slightly different lengths depending on who's reading them. Greg Wise did a version at 18 hours.
Ooh. Does Gary Oldman do one? Please tell me he does.
Some of them are several different readers.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah, I must say,
Okay.
I've listened to a few.
Mark Gatiss did a version.
Yes. I remember when I was at school, because I got into the X-Files when I was at school, and I read a couple of those audiobooks. They were really good. But apart from that, was something. I haven't got anything against it. I'm not a massive snob. I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, if you listen to an audiobook, you haven't really read the book. You have. It's fine. I just haven't jumped on that bandwagon for whatever reason.
When I used to go out and walk,
I need to get on it.
I used to at the gym. The trouble is, I've got so many bloody podcasts, I quite often don't get to the books. But yeah,
I think that's probably my problem.
Yeah. All right. So tell us about
media.
Tell us about our next series.
So yes, at long last, you're going to embark with me on my vanity journey. as we finally get around to the Master of Suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, I've selected a handful of British films and probably all of his American output. But we'll do the list.
We'll do the list as we go through.
We'll do this as we go along. No sort of real surprises. And what I'd also like to do is maybe I haven't finalised anything just yet. Top secret. I've also I'd like to invite a few guests on the show as well, sort of like friends of the podcast and people that that kind of we're sort of in touch with, who have like a connection to the films, or have like an invested interest, for example. And again, they'll be revealed nearer the time.
Yeah, and one thing I will say is Becca sent us the list, not a finalised version, because she did say 3 or 4 that are on there might come off, because if we do the list as it is at the moment, it'll actually be the longest series
it's going to be a long ass series.
In terms of number of films, not necessarily episodes, because I mean Bond was 37 episodes, and then we've done commentaries ever since, so probably more like 60 something. But and now a book, but but a few may be cut. But what I did is just went and had a look where I would find them all. So, for example, I have the Masterpiece collection, which is mainly American, although Frenzy's in it. And I wrote Masterpiece collection next to the ones I have, and Amazon, where I had to buy a few of them and so on, or rent or whatever. Quite a lot of the earliest entries are free on YouTube. Okay, so the film Becca is about to introduce in a minute is on YouTube, and as are some of the very early ones. Okay, which means, Becca,
do you expect to talk? We'll return with a review of The Lodger, the story of the London fog.